They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the ones you love most. For me, it wasn't just my wife, it was my teenage daughter, the girl I had raised and cared for, who lit the match that burned the family to the ground. I started noticing the cracks a few months ago. My wife, who used to greet me at the door with a smile and a warm embrace, suddenly seemed preoccupied. The small, thoughtful gestures she once made, like packing my lunch or leaving me little notes, stopped altogether. It wasn't just the physical distance, it was the emotional wall she had quietly built between us. Then there was my stepdaughter Layla. At 16 she had always been spirited, but now she was sharp-tongued, constantly throwing subtle jabs about how much I worked. Comments like, "Must be nice to have a husband who's actually present," or, "You care more about your job than your family," started creeping into our conversations. I brushed them off, telling myself it was just teenage rebellion. After all, Layla had always been closer to her mom and I figured she was just sticking up for her. But the tension in the house was growing gradually. Conversations became short and awkward. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself that everything was fine. I was working hard for our future. Wasn't that what a good husband and father was supposed to do? I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I thought I could fix it if I worked harder and gave them more. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But as time went on, my stepdaughter's tone shifted. Her words carried a sharper edge, each one like a small jab. She started saying things like, "Mom deserves someone who actually pays attention to her," or, "What's the point of working so much if you can't even enjoy life with your family?" I tried to brush it off, but the weight of her words lingered in the back of my mind. Around the same time, my wife began to change in ways I couldn't ignore. She started dressing differently, wearing outfits that were far more glamorous and youthful than her usual style. It wasn't just the clothes, it was the effort behind them. She'd spend extra time doing her hair and makeup, even when she said she was just meeting a friend or running errands. She hadn't cared this much about her appearance in years. Then came the late nights. At first, it was just the occasional dinner with her friends, but soon she was staying out longer and coming back home with vague excuses. "Oh, it was just a work thing," she'd say casually, or "We lost track of time." Sometimes she wouldn't even bother explaining at all. The phone calls were the most unsettling. She became glued to her phone, texting constantly with a slight smile on her face or stepping outside to take a call. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly put the phone down or change the subject. It was the kind of behavior that screamed secrecy. I couldn't deny the growing distance between us. It wasn't just the late nights or the phone calls, it was the feeling that I was no longer a part of their little world. My wife and stepdaughter seemed closer than ever, sharing private jokes and stolen glances, while I felt more like an outsider in my own home. I felt this was all temporary, that my long hours at work were for their benefit. I was building a future for us, a better life, and when I retired, everybody will appreciate the hard work I put in. But no matter how much I rationalized it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away. It was a little past midnight when I got out of bed to use the toilet. My wife Dana wasn't in bed with me, and I could hear faint murmurs coming from the living room. Curious, and admittedly a little uneasy, I quietly made my way toward the voices. I stopped just short of the doorway, careful not to make a sound. It was Dana and her daughter Layla sitting on the couch, deep in conversation. Layla spoke in a low but firm tone, almost like she was counseling her mother. "You deserve to be happy, Mom," Layla said. Her words were sharp and deliberate. "You've spent too many years trying to make him happy, but what about you? What about what you want?" I felt my chest tighten. Him. She was talking about me. Dana sniffled, her voice weak. "I don't know, Layla. It just feels wrong. What would people think? What if he—" She paused. Layla cut her off, leaning closer to her. "Forget what people think. Forget him. Dad spends all his time at work. He doesn't appreciate you, not the way you deserve. You've put your life on hold for him long enough." I leaned back against the wall, the weight of her words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Dad. Layla had always called me by my name. Hearing her refer to me as Dad in this moment wasn't endearing. It felt like a weapon, twisted and sharp. Dana hesitated, her voice trembling. "But, Layla, I don't know if I could ever." "Yes, you can," Layla interrupted. "Mom, you need to live your truth. You need to find your happiness. If that means finding someone else who sees you for who you are, then do it. You deserve that." My hands clenched into fists as I stood in the shadows, torn between storming in and keeping quiet. My heart pounded, not just with anger but with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Layla, the girl I had taken in as my own, was pushing her mother, my wife, to betray me. And Dana, she wasn't stopping her. She was considering it. For a moment I felt rooted to the spot, unable to breathe. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for this family, the long hours at work, the vacations I missed, the nights I spent grinding to make sure we had the life they enjoyed. Was that all meaningless to them? But I didn't step into the room. Not yet. Something told me this wasn't the right time. I needed to know more. I needed proof of how deep this went. So I quietly stepped back, retreating to the bedroom, my mind racing with questions, doubts, and anger. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying their words in my mind. Find your happiness. Live your truth. Words that now felt like daggers. Whatever they had planned, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't ignore it. I had to act, but I had to act smart. In the coming weeks, I installed discrete cameras around the house, focusing on areas where my wife spent the most time: our living room, the kitchen, and even the back patio where she liked to take long phone calls. I also synced our shared phone account to an app on my laptop, allowing me to see her call and text logs. It felt invasive, but my gut told me there was more to their behavior than I wanted to admit. At first there wasn't much. A few text messages to unknown numbers, some short calls, and a lot of deleted messages. But then one day I got a notification. A text came through before she could delete it. It was from a contact saved as work, but the message read, "I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, hoping I had misread it. But there it was, clear as day. Still, I told myself it could be harmless, maybe a misunderstanding. I needed more proof before jumping to conclusions. Over the next few weeks, the cameras captured my wife sneaking off to take phone calls, sometimes whispering so quietly that the microphone barely picked up her words. I could hear fragments, enough to piece together the truth. Then there was my stepdaughter, who often joined her mother during these calls. I overheard her saying things like, "You deserve this, Mom, and Dad won't even notice." My chest tightened every time I listened. It wasn't just that my wife might be cheating, it was the fact that my stepdaughter, the girl I had raised as my own, was encouraging it. The final blow came one day I wasn't home when one of the cameras recorded my wife leaving the house late at night. I called her asking if she was home, but she said she was going to the store, but she wasn't carrying a purse or keys, just her phone. I followed the footage and saw her getting into a car I didn't recognize. They drove off together, laughing like teenagers. That same night, her text log lit up with messages to the same number saved as work. By the time I gathered enough evidence, I had photos, screenshots of texts, and even voice recordings of their conversations. The hardest part wasn't seeing the proof. It was knowing I had been betrayed by the two people I trusted most. I thought about confronting them immediately, but something in me told me to wait. I needed a plan, and I needed to make sure they felt the consequences of what they had done. I sat in my home office late that night, staring at the piles of evidence I had gathered. My heart ached with betrayal, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let my emotions control me. Confronting them in the heat of the moment would only give them the upper hand. If I wanted justice, I had to be smart. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer, someone I could trust to guide me through what was coming. Sitting across from him in his modest office, I laid everything out: the messages, the photos, and the timeline I had painstakingly pieced together. He listened intently, nodding as I explained how I had discovered the affair and my stepdaughter's role in encouraging it. "Infidelity can play a big role in divorce settlements," the lawyer explained calmly. "With the evidence you've collected, you're in a strong position to protect yourself. But you'll need to act carefully, especially if there are joint assets involved." That conversation was a wake-up call. I couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. That evening, I quietly began making changes. First, I logged into our joint accounts and froze them. I couldn't risk them draining the money we had worked so hard to save, or rather what I had worked hard to save. Then I opened a private account in my name only and redirected my paycheck to it. It wasn't about revenge at this point, it was about survival. If they had already betrayed me emotionally, what was stopping them from betraying me financially? I also started listing out our shared assets: the house, the cars, and even the little things like the expensive furniture and electronics. Each item represented years of effort on my part, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers because of their selfishness. By the end of that week, I had a clear plan. The lawyer had given me steps to ensure I wouldn't be blindsided during the divorce proceedings, and I was determined to follow them. I knew this was going to be a long battle, but I also knew that being methodical now would make all the difference in the end. I didn't say a word to either of them during this time. They had no idea what I was doing. To them, I was still the quiet, hard-working husband and father they thought they could manipulate. But inside, I was sharpening my tools for a storm they didn't see coming. It was a quiet evening, and I had prepared everything carefully. The evidence, photos, text messages, call logs, was laid out neatly on the dining table. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for my wife to come home. When she walked through the door, I could tell she didn't expect anything unusual. She gave me a half smile, the kind that had become all too common lately, and set her bag down on the couch. "Sit down," I said firmly, motioning to the chair across from me. My tone must have startled her because she paused, glancing at me with uncertainty. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice uneasy. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I handed her the stack of printed evidence. Her eyes widened as she flipped through it. The color drained from her face when she realized what it all meant. Screenshots of her messages with the other man, receipts for their secret meetings, and even photos taken by the cameras I had installed. "How could you?" I said, my voice calm but filled with disappointment. "After everything I've done for this family?" She didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the papers, her hands trembling. That's when my stepdaughter, who must have been eavesdropping from the hallway, came storming in. "Stop it, Dad," she shouted, standing protectively next to her mother. "You're the reason she's unhappy. You've been so busy with work that you don't even see her anymore. She deserves better." I turned to her, my face calm but my patience running thin. "And you think better is pushing your mother into the arms of another man? That's how you solve problems in this family?" My stepdaughter's face turned red with anger, but I didn't let her interrupt. "Let me make something clear," I continued, my voice steady but firm. "I worked hard not for myself but for both of you. I gave up time, energy, and countless opportunities to make sure you had a good life. But instead of supporting this family, you plotted against me." My wife tried to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't like that." I raised a hand to stop her. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't insult my intelligence. I have all the proof I need, and there's no excuse for what you've done." The room fell silent. My wife sat frozen, staring at the evidence, while my stepdaughter crossed her arms, glaring at me but saying nothing. "I trusted you," I said finally, my voice quieter now. "Both of you. And you've destroyed that trust." With that, I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving them to sit in the silence of their guilt. Days after confronting my wife about her infidelity, I filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the only way forward. I wasn't just walking away from a broken marriage, I was walking away from betrayal. The evidence I had collected made my case airtight. With this proof, I was able to negotiate a settlement that protected my interests. My wife had broken our trust, and I made sure the court saw it the same way. But this wasn't just about my wife. My stepdaughter, who I had raised as my own, had played a big part in this betrayal. I had funded her education and provided her with every opportunity to succeed. She was about to attend an expensive university, one I had worked hard to save for, but I couldn't let that continue. Trust and respect are earned, and hers was irreparably broken. I made the difficult decision to revoke her access to the college fund. It wasn't out of spite, but because I realized I couldn't reward someone who had been complicit in destroying our family. I explained to her that while I had loved her as my own daughter, her actions had consequences. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but it needed to be said. When the divorce was finalized, my wife and stepdaughter's lives changed drastically. They had to move out of the spacious, luxurious house they'd called home for years. It stood as a reminder of their betrayal, and they no longer had any claim to it. They ended up in a small, modest apartment on the outskirts of town. It was a far cry from the comfort and elegance they had grown used to. The housekeeper they once relied on to clean up after them was gone, and now they had to do everything themselves: cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and paying bills without my support. For my stepdaughter, the loss of her college fund was a rude awakening. She had planned to attend a private university, where tuition cost more than most people's annual salaries. Now she was faced with the reality of taking out loans or working part-time jobs to afford even a community college. As for me, I felt no guilt. I had loved them deeply, provided for them without question, and sacrificed so much of my time and energy for their happiness. But their betrayal was a line I couldn't ignore. I refused to let them use me as their safety net after they shattered the trust we had built. Moving forward wasn't easy. The emotional wounds were deep, and there were nights when I replayed everything in my head, questioning if I could have done something differently. Most importantly, I rediscovered my sense of self-worth. For years, I had been the man who worked tirelessly to provide, often putting my own needs last. Now, I finally understood that I deserved better, better treatment, better relationships, and a better future. As for my wife and stepdaughter, they learned the hard way that actions have consequences. I never wished them harm, but I wasn't going to rescue them from the situation they created. They had made their choices and they had to live with them. In the end, I found peace in knowing I had handled everything with dignity. I didn't stoop to their level or let anger consume me. Instead, I let the truth speak for itself and walked away with my head held high. My focus now is on living a fulfilling, honest life, one where I no longer carry the weight of betrayal on my shoulders.